Hello, welcome to the Tolkien Collector's Guide YouTube channel, where we gather experts from around the world to discuss Tolkien's books and the people who read them. I'm Urulókë, and with me are Trotter and Mr. Underhill.
All right, well, welcome in, everybody. Welcome back to the Tolkien Collector's Guide YouTube channel. Today we are talking with Lance, LanceFormation, over on the Tolkien Collector's Guide. We wanted to bring Lance in because Lance has got some pretty cool stuff. Lance has spent the last few decades carefully collecting, carefully curating his Tolkien book collection, and we wanted to bring Lance in today to talk about some of the highlights of his collection. I know Lance pretty well. We talk almost every day, and Lance has got some really, really cool things that I think need to be brought to light and need to be highlighted. So welcome in, Lance.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here. I've enjoyed your channels, and it's been a thrill participating on the Tolkien Collector's Guide for the last number of years.
And for those of you that don't know, Lance on the guide is LanceFormation. That's his screen name. So my first question for you, Lance, today is, how'd you get started? What's your connection to Tolkien? Why do what got you started collecting Tolkien books, and what got you reading Tolkien in the first place?
Yeah. So like a lot of people, I was in high school in the mid-'70s, and I was a big science fiction fan. Some of the old authors, like Arthur C. Clarke and Bradbury and Asimov, and I never really dabbled much in reading much fantasy. And a friend of mine had a Hobbit. He brought to school one day, and we were sitting around. I was just kind of poking at it, and he told me I should read it. And at first I was like, well, it's, we'll see. And then I just decided, you know what, let me just read it and see what it's all about. And I just fell in love with it. And then, of course, I had to have more, so that led into the Lord of the Rings. And so it pretty much consumed me, I think, my junior year of high school, where I read them once, then read them again, then read them again. And that was the start of my interest in Middle Earth and Tolkien specifically. And I once that happened, I got this this bit sets in me where I have to collect things. I used to collect Beatles stuff before that, and fossils. And when I found Tolkien, it was like, oh no, here we go again. I got the bug. So I just started, going out and finding as much Tolkien material as there was, which, in the mid-'70s was kind of sparse. I grew up in Southwest PA, and it was very hard to find anything locally. I had Pittsburgh nearby, and I could go down to West Virginia University in Morgantown, West Virginia, but it was difficult, to really collect things back then, unless they were, you ran into a local bookstore that maybe had some used books or whatever. Plus the cost. I was a high school kid trying to go, get ready to go to college. I didn't have the funds. But everywhere I turned, though, if I found a used book somewhere, Ballantine especially, like the Barbara Remington covers, I fell in love with those. The Ace books, really fell in love with those. I'd buy them up. And then the hope was, of course, I'd find a better copy later at some other bookstore, So by the time you turn around, I have 3 dozen sets of those. So, but that's pretty much what got me into it. Is really a friend kind of nudged me, and the rest was history. So 45, 50 years later, I'm still collecting, I guess,
Awesome. So I know you mentioned the Ace paperbacks, so we do want to talk about that, because I think you've passed a couple of dozen a long time ago.
Yes.
I know that you have some other highlights of your collection. What would you say are the things that are the sort of like the top of the pile, the things you put on top of the pile? What are the highlights of your collection?
Yeah. So, I guess we'll start with the quantity versus quality first, I suppose. So as I mentioned, as Chad highlighted, I did collect and have collected a lot of Ace books. I think I'm up to 101 sets now of Ace paperbacks.
You passed 100, huh?
So, yeah, I did pass 100. I may not have told you. I guess I snuck that in. And probably I would say, the issue with those, the paper is it's not that great. So even a pristine set is pretty much yellowed. You can't really find, at least in all the sets I have, you can't really find something that's perfect. But I think of all the sets I have probably a dozen or so that are basically no creases, as perfect as they can be. And I had David Miller. He cranked out slipcases for all those for me. So every set's in a slipcase. So, and there's a big stack of Ace books sitting in one corner of our dining room that I created almost like a pyramid. So that's probably, and that was easy because it's certainly until the later years where now the prices are, even for those, have gone through the roof. $1.50 a book. It was not hard to find those years ago and over the years. In fact, did a little experiment. If you wait and poke around, you can still probably pick up books for, individually for $4, $5, $6 a book if you kind of just hold on and not rush out and buy the $400 or $500 sets.
Well, they were very
So
large
another
numbers,
thing
weren't they?
Yeah,
they were very large numbers.
Yeah, I think they back then also didn't they 160,000? I think.
Yeah, I was going to say the print run on those was over 100,000 originally, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it's really surprising how many have survived.
Have you got any with really nice paper? Because I think they must have been all brown paper in the first place, really, weren't
they? I have never found anything nowadays. Even when I was collecting in the 70s and the 80s, I don't think I really ever found a nice white set, or a nice clean set of Ace. But it's still surprising to me that the glue, a lot of them still held together after 6 decades. Considering probably how cheap they were made. And then also I delved into the Ballantine sets, the Barbara Remington covers. Especially the Lion Hobbits. I just fell in love with those, even though, of course, they had nothing to do with the book. Kind of like the latest Rings of Power covers, right? Everybody's complaining, well, they have nothing to do with the Lord of the Rings. But, sometimes things become a classic, even if they're not directly, associated with the book, the book itself. But I probably have 40 Lion Hobbits, all first printings, and some really in exceptional condition. And that's actually surprising too. And a number of Barbara Remington covers, Lord of the Rings sets. From the first, probably through the 10th or 12th printings. And I don't really buy sequential. It's just if I find a nice set, I pick it up and collect those. So those
how
are the
many
ones,
of those, Lance? How many of the green boxes do you have? You have 10 or 15?
I have 13 green boxes.
13. Okay.
Yeah, and I think several of them have the original price stickers, which are hard to find, but they're out there. And I have probably 10 white boxes, and then the kind of reddish, bluish, purplish boxes, the 67, set that came out. I have probably 4 or 5 of those. So
don't you have the every variant of the mass market paperbacks, like Ballantine / Del Rey, all the way up to the present?
Yes,
yeah,
I do. So both the mass market and trade. So unfortunately, it's harder. It wasn't easy, and I don't have all the UK paperbacks. I also dabble a little bit in some of the foreign, like Canadian, things like that. But I guess one day it'd be nice to get some more of the UK paperbacks. But it's a little more difficult to get those. Australia, when I was in Australia, I got the Australians, so that was fun. But it's unfortunately some of those are not in the best of shape. So I guess I'm always kind of on the lookout to replace the ones that are in a little more torn and frayed.
What's your long-term goal with the collection of, like, let's use the Ace paperbacks as an example, where bibliographically and publishing history-wise, they're all identical. They printed up 100,000 plus, and they're all off the same press, the same run. So I've gone through a similar phase of just, every time I go to a library book sale or used bookstore, you see nice copies and you accumulate them. But I'm curious what your thinking is for having all of these sets. Like, what's your goal or what's your long-term vision for these duplicates that you have?
Yeah, exactly. In fact, it's interesting you brought that up, because probably about halfway through, when I began to realize I had a lot of them, I also began to look at them to see if there was actually variance within them. And I never found any variance. I would just randomly pick books out and just compare them, flip through them like sort of every page, every other page or whatever, look at the cover. I never personally found any variant, as if maybe a different printer, may have printed some run or whatever. So at this point, they're just there, they're just part of my, obsession, I guess. And, I have certainly slowed down. I would say there was a big bump for many years, through the 80s I was buying. Then I kind of slacked off in the 80s and 90s, early 2000s, when, work, family, and the rest of life kind of interfered with my collecting. And then I picked up again. But part of the reason I slowed down too is just the cost is just, what people are asking for, the price wise, is just, overwhelming. So it's probably it's probably the side effect is my benefit that I don't, buy as many as I used to. But at this point, that the Ballantines, there are some differences in the Ballantines, of course, especially the Hobbits, once you get past the 5th printing, and they revised it in 66. But I don't really have much of a goal with those, other than I guess at some point I'll probably, I don't know, donate them to kids or whatever. I don't know. Chad will probably take a few off my hands, I guess.
I will take a few.
I'll raise
Yes.
my hand.
Everybody,
Yeah, I would as
that's what I'll
well.
do. I'll just like Tolkien Collector's Guide, like fire sale. I don't know. So, but I haven't got to that point yet. Where I feel that I have to give them up. So
yeah, you would upset all the people selling them for $500 a go as well, wouldn't you? People that
I'm the kind of guy that would probably sell them for like $30 a pop or something like that.
Yeah, that'll finish them off.
Yeah. Lance, what's your I know we've talked a lot about the Ace and we've talked about the Ballantine paperbacks. Is it just what's your connection to those? Is it nostalgia? Is it you just like the covers? Like what is the the love that you have of those particular paperback editions?
Yeah, it's both actually. It's definitely nostalgia. And probably because originally they were cheap to find. As a kid in high school, early college, I could go to a used bookstore, pick them up for, if they weren't giving them away, you can get them for pennies on, cents on the dollar. But also I love the covers. I just thought that they were so I don't know, Picasso-ish. I don't know. I don't know what I would say about the Remington Lord of the Ring covers, but and the Ace just seems so. I don't know. Again, I guess it was just they just appealed to me, and then certainly in later years it turned into nostalgia. It brought back a lot of fond memories of hours walking through the streets of Pittsburgh, going to used bookstores and running down to West Virginia to the college bookstores and things like that. So it was definitely nostalgic, because I think, certainly when I restarted collecting in the early 2000s, I already had so many to begin with. It really wasn't adding anything to my collection other than, hey, maybe I could, like I said, maybe I can find a better set, or, it was just fun to find something cheap or whatever. Those are probably that's probably the 2 or 3 nostalgic things. And there's one more, which I know a lot of people I've posted about, are my 1938 U.S. Houghton Mifflin Hobbits. So that's probably, I guess that would be close to the pinnacle of my collection, I suppose. And so that's kind of interesting too, I guess.
That's very interesting.
Really got into, yeah, well, So I'll just get it right off the bat. I have 62 of them. Just put that out there.
Of the first impressions?
Yes, they're all first impressions. So, well, they're 1938s, but they're all the variants within the 38. So, and I have 17 that are the first quote printings, I guess, with the flute with the bowing hobbit on the title page and all that.
And Lance, how many have jackets still of your 62?
So 5 have jackets.
Okay.
Very, very hard to find, probably kicking myself because I had many opportunities in the 80s, 70s, 80s to buy them with jackets, but, such is life.
I think those are the hardest. I think those are the hardest to find with jackets. I don't know about y'all, but I think the Houghton Mifflin 38 Hobbit might be the hardest book to find with its jacket still.
For some reason, they just do not come up that often, and it could be that maybe they're still being hoarded. I don't know, or maybe they were easily destroyed.
I think they went to libraries, and the libraries just didn't throw away the jackets. I think a lot, even the ones that aren't in library bindings, I think a lot of them actually ended up in libraries.
Yeah, I mean, it was a children's book, obviously, so you're going to get a lot of jackets destroyed that way. But I feel like the UK Hobbits have jackets way more often than those Houghton Mifflin ones do.
Yeah, at least it seems that's what comes up.
That's what it seems.
Probably 7,000 Hobbits, 38 Hobbits that were printed, compared to 1,537 Hobbits in the UK or whatever the numbers were. It is kind of surprising, but again, it could just be. It's interesting when I'm a fossil collector, so there's things you have to watch for. There's biases that you have to be careful of that can sometimes affect why people think things are scarce. And it could very well be like Andrew's saying that maybe a lot of these ended up in libraries. They just tossed the jackets. I don't find the jackets particularly frail. The ones I have.
I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Do you have a 37 jacket or a UK 38 jacket of around the same time frame in your collection?
I have a 37.
So,
yeah.
Have you compared like paper quality and brittleness or anything between those two?
I would say that the 38 is a better. The 37 seems a little bit more brittle than the 38. So that's just from what I found. I have to be I'm very careful when I handle the 37 Hobbit with the jacket, even though it is in, Mylar and all that. But I don't feel it doesn't feel quite as flimsy, I guess. The 38s don't feel quite as flimsy, At least that's just that's what I've experienced. For the one jacket, for the 137 Hobbit I have with the jacket versus the 538s. So.
Well, I've got a partial jacket for the 37 and a partial one for a 38 one, and I have to agree. I think the paper's better on the 1938 jacket. And it looks like they spent more money on the jackets as well. I don't think Alan Unwin spent much money at all on the jackets, whereas in the US ones, there's more colours. Obviously, they're sort of full colour, whereas they restricted the colours on the UK ones. So I just think they spent more on them, and that's another reason why. But again, if they spent more on them and they're better quality, why are there so little of them? That's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's a cultural thing, in the U.S. in the 30s and 40s, if people just didn't keep jackets for their collections as much as people did in the UK. If it was just a different environment or a different mindset between people who had these books just in their home libraries.
Yeah, it could be. Maybe they, took better care of the books. It could be also we were seeing the beginning of mass marketing, right? And people just kind of, But I'm glad at least I have the 5 I found, and it took me, I saw more back in the 80s that I never bought just because I just didn't have the money back then, even though they weren't horrendously priced, compared to today's. But they're not out there. They're not that common, and of course, when the UK ones show up, usually it's like $500,000 or I don't know, whatever the latest ones
some crazy asking prices.
Seems to be.
Yeah, and that gets a lot of attention. So.
Well, we know that the reason that the Houghton Mifflin jackets are different was because Houghton Mifflin thought that Tolkien's jacket was too. What did they say? It was too British. Isn't that
British.
why it was too British?
Well,
but
we like colors.
But they turned it into a jacket with Tolkien's drawings on there. So I don't like this Tolkien drawing's too British, but we're going to put these other Tolkien drawings on there.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing they did is changing the illustrations inside as well, which I still have no idea why they painted over Tolkien's illustrations. in the book. I've never had any real sensible explanation behind that. That was obviously too British as well, the way he wrote on what they were.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because I actually, personally, I actually like the U.S. 38 Hobbit over the UK Hobbit, and probably because it's flashy. I don't know. Maybe it's like I like the little laser pointer type stuff. But I really fell in love with that with the book, and of course, the first book I bought, it was $80. I got it in 1978, so about 40 years after it was released, and I actually bought it because that was the only way I could get the original Riddles in the Dark chapter, and I had never read it. I had seen references, read references to it, and I thought, well, I'm never going to be able to read the original, so I just had to track down a 38 Hobbit, and so I coughed up $80 and bought it from a bookstore in New York, and I just remember when I got it, I ran over to my girlfriend's house, said I got it, and then I immediately left and went home and like huddled up in a corner and read Riddles in the Dark, and it was like the thrill of a lifetime to kind of read the original chapter,
I'm curious if you could tell a little bit, if you recall, on how you had heard that there was a different chapter at that point in the 70s. Like where was that information coming from, if you recall?
That's a good question. I do not recall. As I was like, remembering some of this, I was like, I don't know how I knew that it was different. And it's also interesting in that, it's hard to find, as I mentioned, where I lived, it was hard to find bookstores nearby that I could kind of peruse and, use bookstores and that. So I don't even know how I found this New York bookstore, because it was too far, for me to drive and all that kind of stuff. So I must have had access to, science fiction and fantasy magazines that I was perusing the ads in the back.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, somehow I knew that it was different. But I wasn't even really a member of the Tolkien, the U.S. Tolkien Society had kind of folded by then. And I wasn't really a member of the UK Tolkien Society. So, it could be, just, who knows, maybe even Starlog. I don't know back then. But like I said, I fell in love with it. And then any opportunity over the next few years that presented, I would buy a copy. And again, kind of trailed off in the late 80s, 90s, and then picked up again in the 2000s. And I probably will say that probably at least a third of the books that I have of the 38 Hobbits, a third of them, probably 20 or so, I bought in the last 4 or 5 years. And primarily because I had never really read the wiki article on the variants that's out there, and I never knew that there was actually like 6 variants of the book in the library edition. So that's when I started really poking around to find the second state, which is very difficult to find. That's where they changed the publisher's mark on the title page from the Bowling Hobbit to the Flute Player, and they corrected the map order in the list. But they left the chapter 7 was still chapter 6. They still left that mistake in there. So that's a very difficult state to find. I've only found 4 or 5 of those in the last decade. And I have 2 of them, and I know who has the other one, and another one was sold by the Tolkien Bookshelf. That's all I know of it. But all the copies I have, it seems like the second state is the hardest to find.
The one that I've got is the third state, and I think that's the easiest one to find, isn't it? I think it's the third state.
I would say so. I have more of those, but also that's my buying bias, because I tended to buy more thirds because they were cheaper than the firsts, even though there are firsts out there. And even today, you can go out and find 3 or 4, like on A-Books or eBay. You can find them out there for a large amount of money, but they're out there. So I think the reason why I probably have more third states than first states is because of my buying bias to some extent.
What's Lance? Are you planning on stopping buying Houghton Mifflin Hobbits anytime soon, or you just going to keep going?
Going to keep going. Yeah. I can't. It's so odd, and I'm sure we all experience this. It's still such a thrill when I find one for sale. Now, but this is a little different because I actually, to Jeremy's point, or Jeremy's question that came up with the ACE, I've actually been comparing all the different states um, to the wiki, and I think Tolkien Collector. I guess it was, I forget which issue was, 30 maybe. I'm not sure which one had the 38 Hobbit in it. And I actually think I am seeing some differences that, kind of, are there more than just 6 states? Now, some of those are very nuanced. You have a strike through, you have a break in an N on the third line of, whatever. So I'm trying to see if maybe I could light a fire under myself to really start, because it demands a spreadsheet. So if I could really start building a spreadsheet of the deltas I'm starting to see, plus consistencies throughout all the books where you can definitely see there is a faded character at the end of whatever line that's consistent across all the copies, things like that. So I actually think there's something with all the books I have. I actually think there's some good I could make out of having those. And so there'd really be an interesting exercise over a few years to kind of delve in and see if I could find more, more deltas and more states or whatever, So, and interesting, when we were up at the Morgan Library in New York, when I was with Devon Press, who runs, the U.S. Tolkien books, we chatted with Wayne and all that, and he believed firmly that there are probably many more states than even what are in the wiki, or could possibly be than even what are in the wiki. Certainly more than the 2 states he has in his bibliography that he wrote in '92. So they're nuanced, but still they're they could definitely indicate some type of different printers or reset, whatever.
Well, if you do ever get that finished, Lance, that would be an excellent contribution to the site. That would be awesome to have if you ever get it into published form. That would be awesome to put it on the site.
I know everybody has grandiose plans.
I know, me too. I have the same.
Agree. Yeah, I do agree with you, Lance, as well. Out of the first edition Hobbits that I've got, my favourite probably is the US one. I think it's really nice, nicely made. I even like the binding on it as well. I think that's nice. I think that's better than the UK.
And it's a larger format, and they added the 3 color plates or 4 color plates, like we mentioned before. I guess it was Hobbiton, Rivendell, the Eagle plate, and then Smaug, which is actually one of my favorite. Again, when I was at the Morgan, they had the original on the wall. That's probably by far my favorite. It's interesting, in later copies of The Hobbit, especially like Houghton Mifflin, when they produced the special edition, the 1973 green slipcase special edition, they've added one more color plate. I guess that was the Raft Elves color plate. So, but yeah, I think, and the larger format of the book too than the UK. So they went all out to create a nice little children's book back then.
So, Lance, I know that you have a couple of really cool stories about unexpected books that you may have stumbled upon in certain bookstores. Yeah. What's you want to tell us about a certain book that you stumbled upon on a trip to New York?
Yeah, so it's my fate, I guess, that I do kind of search these things out, and then when I find them, it's like, oh no, I gotta buy it now, I guess.
You have to.
I know you have to. So I do a lot of excursions up to New York City. I live in the Jersey area, but New York's not that far away, so it's pretty easy for me to run up and do a day trip and just kind of walk. So I started mapping out where some of the used bookstores are that I hadn't ever frequented before, and I was walking down to the Strand, which is a famous bookstore in New York City. It's down Broadway around 12th Street, and I decided to take a different way, and I ended up walking down 4th Avenue. And as I was approaching a turn in order to walk over to Broadway, I found this used bookstore, Alabaster. I'm like, that's kind of interesting. I didn't see that on any of my maps. So I walked in, and I just started chatting with the owner for a minute or so. And as I was kind of eyeing up it's New York, everything is kind of narrow and deep. So, I was kind of eyeing up what he had in the shelves, and I saw this case behind the cash register, the glass case. And I figured, well, there you go. That's where the expensive stuff is. And I saw 2 Tolkien books, and one was the first 1955 U.S. Return of the King with jacket, and the other one was a Hobbit, a UK Hobbit. I'm like, wow, that looks suspiciously like an early Hobbit. So he pulled it out, and wouldn't you know, it's a 1937 second impression Hobbit, no jacket. But I was like, oh man, I can't believe I found this. And it's like, so then we started talking about price, because I knew as soon as I saw it, and it actually looked to be in better shape than, and I have, I guess, 4, I had 4 at the time. So I already had a number of 37 second impression Hobbits and one with the jacket. But this one probably had the best text block, and the boards were actually in pretty decent shape. So I kind of suspected it was better than my other Hobbits, and then I knew I was probably going to buy it. So then we started talking about price, and part of the problem is in New York, the sales tax is close to 10%. So it's not cheap. So I was like hemming and hawing, and it wasn't an inexpensive book, because he knew what he was selling. And especially when they got online and was doing the eBay search, and I was like, oh boy, this is not good.
Oh no, the eBay search.
They're going to figure out real fast how much these are selling for.
No. You don't have to look. It's okay. You don't have to look at eBay. It's fine.
I was trying to steer them clear, but it didn't work. So then I left, and the first thing I did was I think I texted Chad and said, I was doing some Christmas shopping also. I texted Chad and I said, you're not going to believe what I found. And of course, Chad, being the friend that he is, was encouraging me to spend my money.
I was.
Yes.
and buy. So I like hemmed and hawed. Finally, I did go back and I bought it. So, and I'm glad I did, because you don't usually find things like that in bookstores, especially a small bookstore that doesn't do any advertising. He doesn't have a social media presence. He doesn't use any of the online, brokerages or anything. He just buys and sells locally within the New York City area, and he apparently had it for a while. But I was glad I bought it, because it's an interesting story. It's a fun story for me, and it just goes to show you, after 45 years, you can still stumble across some things that are, give you a thrill. It didn't give me the tingle up the spine, but it certainly was close enough that I was kind of ecstatic that I found it. But it took a while for me to finally just throw in the towel and go back and buy it, because again, I already had 4 copies. It's like, do I need another copy? And it turned out it actually was the best text, has the best text block and boards of the books that I have. So I swapped. I shouldn't have done it, but I took the jacket off my not so good one and put it on the nicer one. So I am guilty of that. So
I think it's a valid point here. So I think people nowadays think, well, what's the point of going into a used bookstore, because they won't have anything. But sometimes, if you don't go in, you're not going to know for a start. And sometimes they do.
Mm-hmm.
It's still worth doing. It's still a good idea to do this. Sometimes you'll find something.
Well, it's New York City, and it's kind of like if you all remember, some of you may remember, out in Los Angeles in the 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, a lot of bookstores out there. New York City, the same thing. So even post-pandemic, there are still, even though stores have closed, unfortunately, there are still a lot of bookstores in New York City. I mean, you could, dozens upon dozens upon dozens. I mean, you have bookstores that are specialty bookstores that just sell cookbooks, So, if you have the time and want to kind of map out some, decent bookstores up there, you can do that. And I'm a big walker, so I just like to go up and just walk the city and see what I find. This was unexpected though, because like I said, it hadn't shown up really, because I guess they didn't have a big social media presence. But so it just goes to show you now, I don't pass by anything when I'm walking. I just poke my head in and see what they got. You just don't know.
Yeah, and building relationships with bookstores. If you have ones that you visit regularly and you get a relationship with the owners or the staff there. I've since moved, but when I was in the Bay Area of California, there were a couple of bookstores that would contact me regularly. Oh, we got new Tolkien in. Here's what this is what someone brought in today. So they're very important. The world has not completely shifted to online mass, marketplace, highest bidder, lowest price, eBay and Abe and all those things. There's still a huge amount of personal experience in this. Like you said, walking the streets and just finding new stores, or, having a regular shop that you visit. They're all an important part of collecting, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think building the relationships, even though I'm outside of Philadelphia, so we do have a number of bookstores locally that are, small proprietor. They're run by, people who are just, love books and just want to sell them. But this one person who runs a bookstore not far from where I worked, he keeps me in mind if he gets anything like ephemera. I don't really collect a lot of ephemera, but every once in a while he'll get something in, and it's like, yeah, it looks kind of interesting. Like, especially if it's Silmarillion, related, because, I
should keep Jeremy in
was,
mind if he's collecting ephemera. He's got ephemera.
Oh yeah, well, you should see all the posters.
I'm like salivating.
He had all these posters. So, but it's nice to build those relationships, because every once in a while I will get a message saying, hey, I got this, small Silmarillion salesman poster, and do you want it, and stuff, so it's like, yeah, I'll take it, even though that's not my focus. So, and by the way, my focus is pretty much still Lord of the Rings, Hobbit, Silmarillion. I learned over the years that when I was collecting, I tried to, like with the Beatles stuff, I tried to buy everything, imports, UK imports, all this kind of stuff. And fossil collecting, every kind of fossil, or, minerals or whatever. I just found I had to focus my, to create a core, group of things that I was really researching and looking out for. And, every once in a while you expand outward. Everybody does, I guess, you kind of shift your focus or expand your focus a little. But even to this day, after 45 years, I pretty much am still still focused on the Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and the Silmarillion. So, and it's nice to have people that, because, they're, these people that run the bookstores, they kind of know to keep a watch out for things like that. It's a little more difficult when somebody gets any Tolkien item in and they give you a yell saying, hey, I got a fifth impression of, or a fifth printing of, I don't know, Farmer Giles or something like that. It's like, well, okay, that's nice, but it's not, it's not really what I'm looking for,
Has anything really got away that you wish you had bought and you didn't?
So I thought about that. And, you always have maybe a nicer copy of X or a cheaper copy of Y or whatever that probably gets away. But I guess, I'm not really actively watching for it. And, if it comes up, it'll probably be horrendously expensive now, because so many people are looking for it. But it's the 82 rebind of the Silmarillion that was issued. Yeah, I'm kind of, to this day, kind of kicking myself, because one did come up for under $1,000 a number of years ago. And it's like, well, at the time it was like, that really wasn't what I was focusing on. And
you should have jumped
on
it, Lance.
Well, I know. Well, and so that's probably the one thing that got away. Because I guess if I had that, I'd have pretty much all the Silmarillion issues, UK and US, that I would be interested in collecting, if I got that. But I know what's going to happen. How many of us want that now? And once it comes up, it'll probably be five. It would not surprise me if it was five figures, at least starting. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a $10,000 book.
Well, I'm not paying five figures, but yeah.
People do want it, and unfortunately, nowadays it's not like you're going to find one and nobody else is going to be interested in it. There's a huge demand for those. So they do turn up occasionally, but there's just a massive demand for them.
Yeah,
because there's so many people want them.
And I know people that have them, but they're not going to let go of them. And it's, so at this point, I kind of figure, well, if I stumble upon it and it's less than the cost of an electric car, maybe, I'll contemplate it. But at this point, and it's very specialized too, right? I mean, you get people that are definitely buying books out there for the value, the resale value, looking to make a investment killing, I guess. But not a lot of people probably see the investment value of some of those more rarer books, if there is any investment value in them,
Well, Well, that is obviously one of the rarest Silmarillions. I'm always very pleased to say that I have the rare unsigned version of it, unlike the very common signed version that I much rather have, but I do have the rare unsigned one.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if it went to Sotheby's, how much it would go for, though. I'm not sure that there's a huge. Well, you never know what kind of market's out there for something like that, and whether they would even try to sell it, because it is kind of a little more obscure, albeit rare.
Speaking, Lance, speaking of obscure, tell us about those children book club Hobbit that you have behind you back there. I see you have 3 of those.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so these guys.
Yeah, those guys.
Those are all in David Miller's. One's in a clamshell, and the other 2 are in slip cases. Mm-hmm. So Devin Press, another friend of mine who enjoys having me spend money. He stumbled upon an eBay listing for a children's Hobbit with a jacket. So he grabbed it for, literally almost nothing. And so immediately he contacted me and said, "You're not going to believe what I got." And then, of course, immediately I said, "How much do you want for it?" And so we made a deal. We went up to New York City and we met in some, Korean restaurant or whatever. We did the deal under the table, where I digitally transferred money and he gave me the book. And so I ended up having David created a clamshell, which I think he's done a few clamshells before for the Children's Hobbit. So my one Children's Hobbit with a jacket is in the taller clamshell here. And then the other 2 Children's Hobbits, I think I actually got one off of David. And then I found one online. They weren't exactly in the best of condition, but I bought them because I wanted to be complete with the, having, the 37, the first and second impressions, the 42 Hobbit, the Children's Hobbit, the 46 Hobbit, so at least you have all the first edition Hobbits. But actually, Devin, the one he found, the jacket was not in bad shape. The book, I actually think the book was not in the best of shape, and I may have switched jackets on one of the books I had that was in better shape. But at least I'm glad I got that, because you don't really see children's Hobbits with jackets come up that often either.
I think one did turn up, but it was in terrible condition on eBay recently. Right. So, but it's more finding them in reasonable condition, because again they're just as bad. The paper's terrible on the dust jackets compared with
and
ones.
What was the print run on jacket,
those? 3,000.
3,000. Okay.
3,000.
So not that many.
But I don't think people kept the jacket because it's completely unrelated really to The Hobbit. So I'm sure that most of it is about Nazis and things and members of the Foils book club. It is. It's a ridiculous jacket. It's nothing to do with The Hobbit.
Well, Tolkien hated that dust jacket.
Well, I'm surprised. Mm-hmm. I love it because Tolkien hated it. I like things that Tolkien didn't like. So I really like that one. Yeah.
That's actually,
it's probably my favourite dust jacket. It's a marvellous. I love the Bertie Wooster thing on the front. It's just so 1930s. It really is.
I actually took some of the jackets and I took pictures of them and I turned them into phone covers. So every once in a while I'll whip out my 1938 phone cover and put it on my iPhone or the Foils one. And of course, nobody has any idea what they are, except I think one person recognized Bilbo Comes to the Hut to the Raft Elves. Somebody did recognize that. He was at the Met. It was a guard at the Met, at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So I had my phone out, and he said, "Oh, I recognize that." And it's like, of all people, there's a guard at the Met. And I think I actually had my Tolkien shirt on too. So definitely looked like a geek at that point, I suppose, with all that Tolkien stuff on. So, and probably the one thing that we haven't mentioned that is actually kind of like one of my non-book Tolkien items that I really like is this, which you can't see because it's covered up, but it's a Tolkien letter. So
what letter is it?
Yeah, so it's right here.
Yep.
And it's a letter I got off of, I think David Miller had 2 letters he was selling 4 or 5 years ago. And I picked one up and I figured, you know what? It was kind of expensive, but I thought, how often do you get a chance of getting a Tolkien, letter? So it's handwritten, signed. It's from his 76 Sandfield Road. And it has an interesting provenance. It's to Miss Turnbull. And he's kind of talking about how he's just finishing up some editorial items with the 3rd volume of The Lord of the Rings. And it's actually mentioned in Wayne's book, and of course it's on Tolkien Gateway. So if it's on that, you got it.
It's
made.
official.
So it was official. So I wasn't too worried about buying it, because I am kind of reluctant to. And it is a handwritten letter, so the chances of it being forged, the whole letter and signed, is with the envelope is not that great. But I was always reluctant to pick up anything that was supposedly signed by anybody, any author, because you just don't know. And I just didn't have the experience to be able to know whether or not the signatures are real. But anyway, there was enough provenance that I bought it. And I'm so glad I did, because, again, this is one of these things where Tolkien letters, especially if they have, obviously if they have extensive references to his writings, they go for a lot of money. And you see some of the ones that are 4, 5, 6 pages with, various, like the history of this, like of a certain word, or ancestry or whatever. They go for outrageous amounts of money. But I'm glad I picked it up, because it does have a passing reference to the Lord of the Rings, and it kind of even though I don't show it because I'm afraid that the light in the even incandescent or LED light will fade it. At least I have it. And it's nice to have something handwritten by Tolkien, that I can use to complement my books.
Yeah, I bet you are glad you got that, Lance, because the prices for Tolkien letters, anything that Tolkien signed or Tolkien letters, especially the last few years, they have just skyrocketed. So it's a good thing you got that when you did, I think.
Yeah, but it's like anything, I've had the thrill and have been lucky enough to be able to collect for so long that you had the chances of buying things. Of course, we've all seen prices skyrocket. I've seen them jump several times over the last 45 years for various reasons. Especially after Jackson's movies came out.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if the Rings of Power is going to have as much. Will cause prices to skyrocket. And who knows what the way things are. When you factor in the way the economies are and everything. But I've been lucky to be able to buy things that, and I could afford things that, now if I started collecting, I'd probably be very reluctant to pick up a lot of these just because of price. I'd have to sell the house. That's the first thing. My wife would probably have something to say about that. And then our 401ks would be decimated.
And she might.
So, yeah, she might.
Absolutely. No, it's a hard choice, between a house and a book. You got to weigh the pros and cons. I have a question on the shelf behind you. Trivially, moving to something completely different, if you will, the teeny tiny little Hobbit book that's just off your left shoulder.
Yes.
Tell me about that. To me, it looks like it might be like like an Etsy miniature book project. It doesn't. I'm not sure that there's an official Hobbit that size, so I'm very curious what that is.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. It is an Etsy thing, but it's apparently there is a huge market for miniatures for dollhouses, right? So somebody had posted the complete Lord of the Rings with the Hobbit and all that for sale miniatures, and they're like, some of the size are only like 3/4 of an inch to this is a couple inches. So I just bought it as like, what the heck. And it actually has like 30 pages reproduced from the book, including some of the color plates. So it's like,
wow.
It's like, yeah, I know. It's like, so it's kind of fun. I think I was going to buy the Lord of the Rings, and then I didn't end up buying it. And I just thought, what am I going to do with this? And I thought, you know what? I'll just put it on the shelf. It doesn't add much weight. I'm always worried about the weight of my books on my glass shelves, So I figured, what's one thin wafer if anybody has a Monty Python reference? But I figured, what's the weight of one small book, on the shelf? And it kind of like, it's kind of cool, kind of stands out. And I have some Weta and some Iron Studios figures too, but they add a lot more weight to my shelves. And usually when I get more books, they're the first things that disappear off the shelves are my statues, because even though I like them as kind of garnish, I don't really collect. I don't really collect much, statues or anything from the movies or anything like that. So not much. So, but that's the story behind it. It's a little dollhouse miniature.
That's great.
Yeah,
No, I love stuff like that as well. It's it adds flavor to the collection and the shelf display. Just to have little oddities like that. I know you have like some publisher proofs and dummies, and I don't think we've talked about those yet. So I thought it might be interesting just to get a few minutes on some background. Since you have a few, tell us what they are, why they exist, not just for us, for the viewers. I think it's very interesting to talk about those a little bit.
yeah, sure. And so that's an interesting area that I actually just recently started buying. I hadn't really thought much about these publishers' dummies, or they call them salesman's copies, whatever you want to call them, mock-ups, until a couple of them presented themselves. One person was selling, I think, I forget which book it was, one of the History of Middle Earth books as a Houghton Mifflin. It was a proof, uncorrected proof. And I thought, let me just get it and see what it's like. And most of them are, at least the ones I have are mostly the Houghton Mifflin proofs, uncorrected proofs. They are just like a flimsy paper cover, which maybe states that they're an uncorrected proof, and that the contents could change when it comes down to the release date. I guess sometimes they'll put out a little letter indicating what the expected release date is and the price the book might sell for.
Lance, those Houghton Mifflin proofs just have like a cardstock cover, don't they?
Yeah.
Like on the front, yeah.
Yeah, I actually have 2 or 3, 4 now of the History of Middle Earth ones, and I was thinking, I guess that's one of those things I guess I'll watch out for now to see if I could eventually, find the other, 8 or so.
Wouldn't that be great to have a complete set of the publisher's dummies? That would be awesome.
Yeah. It's just too bad it isn't the UK ones, but the US
I've
ones.
never seen any of the UK ones.
The Allen and Unwin ones are impossible to. Yeah, Andrew, didn't you say they threw those away? Do you think they threw those away? The Allen and Unwin ones?
Yeah, they threw them away. They didn't keep them.
Yeah, well, but then didn't we just see at one of the auction houses a proof set of the Lord of the Rings just show up?
Yeah, Christie's has a set of the Lord of the Rings out, and the Silmarillion had quite a few, but post Silmarillion from the UK, I haven't seen a lot of advanced reading copies or review copies, or certainly not the dummies, the ones that are blank pages inside. Those are those tapered off after the Silmarillion. I don't think they really did those anymore.
Yeah, and actually it's kind of interesting because I think the only UK one I have is actually, of all the ones I have, it's actually the one I enjoy having. That's the proof of the Silmarillion that I bought. So yeah, that's interesting because you pretty much open it up. It's all blank pages except for the first, I don't know, whatever number of pages have some text and everything on them, and then the map is completely blank.
It's like the first 30 pages, right, Lance, that have text, and the rest is blank.
Yeah, the rest is
blank.
They are
slightly different. Some of them don't have any. I think some of them haven't got anything at all. They're all blank.
I know. I actually almost oh no, because then I found out there were variants of the uncorrected proofs. It's like,
that doomed you. You found out there were variants. Oh no.
It's just like, and I started reading. I went back to various previous posts from years ago in the Tolkien Collector's Guide, and I saw all these there's this variant, this variant, this variant. And it's like, oh no, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to read it, because then I don't want to have to run around trying to collect variants, but of proofs. But and then another one I got, which was just by accident. I was searching on AbeBooks for some Hobbits, and I just did a global search, and up popped one of the 1973 Houghton Mifflin green slipcase special, edition Hobbits, and they said it was a publisher's proof. And I'm like, I never heard of that. So I sent them an email like 2 emails and inquiries. Didn't hear anything for months, and I sort of figured, well, I probably could write that off. But yet it was still listed. But you know how sometimes those things, people, listings stay up there forever, even when they're sold or if they or whatever. But I figured I'd poke at them again. They came back right away, sent pictures. It's like, wow, this is like great. So I bought it, and yeah, it was very unusual because the entire book is blank, different. The end papers are different, and the outside doesn't have the, you know how it's embossed. I guess there's some goldish or red, embossing to the, all that's gone. Different, yeah. So it's just different enough that I thought, yeah, this is pretty cool. And plus, it came with a letter explaining how the book was coming out in a few months, and the expected price and all that. So that was actually an interesting find. And that was completely by accident. I wasn't even looking for it. And it was, it was kind of nice to be able to track that down. And I think then of the non-legendarium, I have just recently bought Smith of Wooten Major. I guess that's what 1967 proof, and that's the same kind of thing. It's a little different covers, but I went page by page, and it's pretty much identical. Same drawings internally. I didn't read everything, but what I did was I just kind of looked at the last word, as I was going through each book, looking at the last word of each page to see if the offset was different or whatever. So the printing was different, but yeah, it was that's an interesting book too, because I never really bought any non-legendarium proofs up until then. But yeah, that was an interesting find, and I thought not a lot of people had seen that before. And of course, I think was it Peter? I'm not sure. One of the overseas sellers, he actually had sold a copy years ago. So, and I looked at the pictures, and it was different enough that I could, be fairly certain it wasn't the same copy resold, to me, years later. So they're out there,
Well,
they're out there.
they wouldn't have produced that many of them because I don't think they were in the UK. I'm pretty sure they weren't sending them out to reviewers. They were really just to check whether the printing was being done properly, more than anything else. Those ones, so they're very small numbers, I would imagine. And I said Allen and Unwin didn't keep them; they just threw them away. So they got any back. They binned them, which is a great shame because it'd be lovely to have. And I think that's why there aren't so many of them. I'd love to see some of the proofs, see how it changed. What changed?
Yeah,
in
exactly.
It. Yeah, that's the interesting bit.
Yeah, especially the blank ones though can't help you much.
No,
but,
well they've got some words in. Yeah, they got some text in. That's what changed.
No, the blank ones don't help a lot. Well, if that's true, if they didn't send out any, that's a miracle that even any are left, like with the Smith of Wooten Major ones.
My guess on that is that the printers kept them, because they wouldn't have sent them back to Allen and Unwin. The printers, they'd have kept them. They would probably thrown them away as well, but some of the printers kept them, I think, and that's why a few of them are still around. I don't think it was the publishers who kept them.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that. You're also seeing people's collections being, sold now, old time collections, booksellers like Trotter, or, people have found, collections of books sitting in attics that people, booksellers may have stashed up there from 40 years ago, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see some more of that creep up as longtime collectors start getting rid of their, books and everything. I see that in science fiction all the time now. You have people that, collected science fiction in the late 1800s, early, 1900s, mid 1900s. I see a lot of Bradbury, Asimov, or H.G. Wells, Jules Verne. I see a lot of them showing up now because people are, dumping their collections. So I guess that's my fate eventually. Hopefully not for a few more years, but
hopefully not.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be handing down to my family. They don't seem to be as interested in my books, but actually, I think some of my collection is definitely going to be going to some local libraries. We have the Rosenbach in Philadelphia is a well-known local library that has they have like the original Moby Dick, Dracula manuscripts, things like that. And I have a lot of friends who are Tolkien, fans who we meet with when we go to the Philadelphia group, which I'm doing next
Mhm.
week. So I definitely have plans to at least some of my collection will go to the Rosenbach, although they don't know that, but now they will, maybe. I don't know. We'll
They
see.
might.
They
We
might.
should
So,
get you in
but,
touch with Bill Fliss
yeah.
at the Marquette as well. I know he's always trying to keep an eye out for things for the Marquette collection, so he would certainly be willing to chat with you, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I would enjoy that too. It's just at some point, I'll have my enjoyment, and it's time for others to enjoy it, whether it be privately, I guess, if that ends up being the case for some of my material, or if it ends up being worthwhile to be in a library or some
Mm-hmm.
public institution, So
Speaking of Lance, speaking of libraries, the one thing that I have on my list here that I forgot to mention, or that I forgot to get you to mention, was you have some library binds of some Houghton Mifflin Hobbits,
yes,
some copies that were specifically bound for libraries that are pretty unusual looking, right? And they are, a lot of them are one of a kind, I think, right?
right, yeah, they're very. There are some bindings that look fairly generic, like a checkerboard pattern. They really didn't have any, there really wasn't much thought put into it, but others look like they actually copy, a two-tone image of the dust jacket, and put those on the boards. They print right on the boards. And the unfortunate thing with the library ones are you tend to lose the maps, since the maps are paste down on the original boards and everything. And when they get rid of the boards, you kind of lose the map, or at least you lose half the map. And so I do have a couple library bindings where the front map is missing, the board side, the left side, and the rear map is missing the right side, which is unfortunate. But yeah, they were interesting finds, because that's another one where I hadn't really thought about library bindings, and then one kind of fell in my lap when I saw a really cheap 38 Hobbit on 8 books, and I picked it up, and it arrived, and it's like, oh wow, this is like kind of a library binding. And then I did a little bit of research, and that's actually how I found the wiki article about US, the US Hobbits and all that. And it's like, wow, I didn't really realize that there were so many kind of unique library bindings. And then I guess I got maybe 5 or 6 of them, and there are a couple that are out there still that I've seen images of on Google or whatever that I haven't been able to find, but I guess they're out there,
Somebody's got
somewhere. But yeah, somebody's got them. But it's like we were mentioning with library books. They do get a lot of abuse.
Yeah,
It's unfortunate, not only from the library stamps and the card holder, that they put in, but also just in general. But it's funny. Sometimes I think I got one of my 19 no my second impression Hobbit, 1937 second impression Hobbit, was the one that was floating out there for a while. People may have seen that actually had a dust jacket, but it was from a library in Australia. So the book itself had all kind of library markings, but the dust jacket was in pretty good shape. So you could tell they probably, just removed the jacket, unless, somebody found a jacket later on and put it on the book. But it looked like they removed the jacket and never was in circulation like the book was, And that was true of one of my 38 Hobbits. I got one that was a library book that had a pretty decent jacket, one of the few jackets I have, and it looked in, it's pretty good shape, and you could tell it definitely wasn't in circulation. It just couldn't have been, and survive like that.
I have a Boots lending library in the UK, Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, and they have a little hole in the bottom. The idea was that you put your tag went in the hole, which you bought from, so you could only take one book out at once, because when you've taken when you couldn't have put it in more than one book at the same time. So, but I thought, well, I'd love to get one of these tags, and I looked on eBay, and they're even more than the book cost. Because people collect the library tags, and I thought, so I'll bet I'll look on that one. I will find one someday. But they were about 3 times what I paid for the book just for this little tag.
People collect everything, Andrew. You name it, there's somebody out there that collects it.
Well, I thought I'd get away with a nice cheap version of that. No chance.
Yeah. There's a lot of, you've seen, you can look on eBay and you can see all the library bindings that have come and gone. Some people want, a horrendous amount of money because they're unique, they're one of a kind, and all that. And even for the Ballantine books, right? The U.S. Ballantine books, you see the library bindings pop up. Interestingly enough, I found library bindings for an Ace set. I think I only have Fellowship and 2 Towers, but somebody, they were rebound.
That's
who knows
interesting.
when? And so it's fascinating actually. Sometimes, and most of it, they're just copies of the covers, right? That they just put on the boards.
That's interesting. That may have been like a librarian's kind of like pet project or something.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah,
you never know. But and then every once in a while, we'll find library bindings of. I think I have 2 Return of the King first printings from 1955, the U.S. Houghton Mifflins, that are in library bindings. No jackets, but one was the New York Public Library, one was Princeton. So, they were local. It's like, and they were, $50, $75. I figure, what the heck? I'll just get them, But it's kind of fun to have them. They're kind of different,
isn't one of those
getting a little beat up?
But. Yeah, isn't one of those black? One of the ones you have, Lance? One of
yes.
Those, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I think you may have. You probably saw it when I saw it, and contemplating whether or not.
I remember that conversation.
It was in pretty bad shape, but again, it was kind of a local thing for me, so I figured, what the heck, I'll just buy it. So, but then you start amassing all these library copies,
And you got to find 2 Towers and Fellowship now to go with it.
Yeah, I know. There are a lot of libraries out there that rebound books, I'm sure. Yeah, so.
I know. Yeah. Now, a lot of times those things are just serendipity. You find one, it's interesting. It's not a bad price. You pick it up, but if you followed every one of those threads of just interesting serendipitous books you found at a sale and turn that into another aspect of your collection, the collection mushrooms into, unstorable and unmaintainable. It just gets massively too large. I think you have to focus somewhere, and it's always good. I was going to ask you, what's the most tenuous thing you have in your collection that's just barely related to Tolkien or his books? I think we all have something that's just like, a tea towel for the Pauline Bain's map is one of those things. It's obviously related, but it's not a common collectible because they just printed up a few for the publisher for an event, if I remember that story correctly. So do you have anything like that that's just kind of weirdly associated?
Yeah. Well, probably I've been pretty good, although I have faltered at times. I've been pretty good at not just picking up things because it has Tolkien's initials on it, or but I guess maybe the Ralph Bakshi animation cells from his 78 movie. I have those. They're, one could argue, I would argue with all the movies and Rings of Power and all that, they're really just either interpretations or fan fiction. And you can kind of, as people do, argue there's not core Tolkien material. I mean, the Ralph Bakshi movies, they tried to follow the books somewhat, of course, but I'm not like full bore into collecting, the animation stuff. But that's probably the closest thing I have that I would say is, kind of related. I guess I'm trying to remember the artist also. He created clay figurines in the 70s. Marcus? No. I'm going to butcher his name. I'll have to. Yes.
Was it Mike?
I have
Mike
one
Macris?
of his Bilbos.
Excellent.
Yeah, something like that. I have actually from his daughter. She was selling some of his collection, and I actually bought one of the Bilbo figurines that was based on the Hobbit cartoon, Rankin Bass Hobbit cartoon from '77. So, that was again another thing that was like, that's pretty cool. So I'll buy that. And I'm glad I did. She had a number of things up for sale, I don't know how well they sold, but I'm glad I got this because that was very, for me, that was very, it was very nostalgic because back then you didn't have, like I mentioned before, there wasn't a lot of Tolkien material out there for me that was kind of isolated in a small town in Pennsylvania. But when the Hobbit movie came out, that was, on TV, that was like a big thing. It's like, wow, I
Yeah.
could finally see some interpretation of Tolkien's material. Of course, then the Silmarillion came out the same year. And then the Lord of the Rings animation came out in '78. But yeah, that was a big thing. So it was very nostalgic for me to be able to pick up that.
Cool. As I said earlier, I think we could go for hours more, and we're going to want to have you back to dive into some other fascinating topics. But this has been a fantastic chat with you, Lance. Really glad you were able to come on. I definitely want to keep talking with you more about your collection, but I think this would be a good place for us to wrap it up for this particular conversation, unless any of you guys have anything else you wanted to chat about.
Well, we have to ask Lance what would he save if his house were on fire?
Oh yes, mandatory.
Yeah, I knew you. I probably, I guess I grabbed the Tolkien letter.
Yeah. We always preface that with all the people are out, all the pets are out, everybody's safe.
Oh yeah, I forgot to say that.
It's a thought experiment, right? It's a thought experiment to make you think about what's your kind of like what do you feel is one of your most important to you pieces in your collection. So everybody's safe, everybody's sound. I would not face imminent death by running in the house. I would grab my Tolkien letter, and if I could so I'll kind of stretch it. And if they're all on the same shelf, if I could grab my first UK Hobbit with jacket and one of the 38 Hobbits with jacket, I would also. So, but I guess the letter first, because they're a little more unique. I know he wrote a lot of letters, but
you tuck the letter under your arm, Lance, and then you got two hands, one for the UK, one for the.
Excellent.
So yeah, that's probably what I would grab then. Would be those.
Makes sense.
Well, like Jeremy said and Andrew said, we really appreciate you coming on today with us. It's been an excellent discussion, and I think people are going to enjoy it. People who watch the video.
Great. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to watch your interviews, and it was a thrill being on. So thank you.
Thank you.